What ripple could you create if today was the day you chose to lead fearlessly, use your gifts, and inspire others to do the same? I'm Jody Grunwald, founder of Today is the Day, a platform, a movement, and this podcast that's all about authentic connection, bold leadership, and making an impact that lasts. As an executive coach, consultant, and changemaker, I work with leaders and organizations globally to align missions, connect with clients in meaningful ways, and grow both purpose and, of course, revenue. And today I'm thrilled to welcome Sharla Brown, a powerhouse social entrepreneur, philanthropist, and humanitarian who's changing the world one ripple at a time. After a life-changing trip to Ecuador in 2015, Sharla launched One Woman and One Girl, a global social enterprise dedicated to helping women and girls reach their dreams through education, skills development, and entrepreneurship. Since then, her One Woman Fearless events have grown to over 200 events across the US, Canada, the UK, Ireland, Indonesia, Australia, and New Zealand, creating a wave of empowerment for millions around the world. Get ready to be inspired because today is the day to create your own ripple of change. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Today is the Day Live It. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and stream on all major platforms. And visit todayisthedayliveit.com to learn how I can best support you and your organization. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I'm your host, Jody Grunwald, and as I say in every episode, I interview the changemakers, the inspirers, and those who are disrupting the status quo in the best way possible. And today I have Sharla Brown with me. Hi, Sharla.
Hello, Jody.
I'm so happy that you're able to join. So thank you for doing this. I know when we first chatted, you said you don't do a ton of podcasts. So I am honored that you agreed to come on Today's the Day Changemakers.
Yeah, no, I'm very honored that you have me. I know you do amazing work with highlighting wonderful people who are out there changing the world, and I was honored that you asked me to be a part of it.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to read a little about your bio, and then I'm going to ask you some fun questions because we want to learn more about Sharla. So, Sharla Brown is a renowned Canadian social entrepreneur, philanthropist, and humanitarian who has been passionate about entrepreneurship, leadership, and social issues her entire life. Sharla mentors, teaches, and inspires other women to embrace their leadership potential and entrepreneurial spirit. She empowers those around her to use their gifts to create a purpose-driven life, doing what they love because she believes that each person's gifts are like pebbles they can toss in the water, creating ripples that positively impact the world around them. I love that. I love that
Thank
whole
you.
ripple effect piece, and that is so true. In 2015, Charlotte traveled to Ecuador, and a world-changing ripple effect began through her creation of One Woman and One Girl. These global social enterprises are a mission to help women and girls around the globe live their dreams and reach their full potential through education, skills development, and entrepreneurship. Charlotte has created over 200 one-woman fearless events in the USA, Canada, United Kingdom, Ireland, Indonesia, Australia, and New Zealand. I just want to get started because there is just so much in there. There's a couple more lines in here, but I don't need to go any further. I want to hear from you directly. Um, okay, so you grew up in Canada, right?
Correct.
And
Yes.
I always like to ask this question of my guests is tell us a little bit about your childhood. What kind of child were you? Were you shy? Were you outgoing? Who was
I
Charlotte growing
actually,
up?
yeah, I actually was kind of a quiet little girl, but I always had big goals and dreams. And I grew up a very small town country kid, but I always had big goals and dreams. I remember in like I think it was grade 4. In the back of our classroom, there was all these magazines, and I grabbed a copy of National Geographic and seeing all these incredible places around the world and so many places that just intrigued me that looked like a life so very different than my own, and just wanting to see these places and meet these people and see these extraordinary sights and learn more about what it was all about. And so I would flip through the pages of National Geographic and learn about different places and cultures and people. And that was kind of my first, I guess, introduction to kind of the world and, my interest in, global issues.
That's amazing that's where it started. What did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
You know what? I wasn't one of those typical kids that said like they knew that they wanted to be, a doctor or a nurse or a teacher or anything like that. But I always knew I had an entrepreneurial spirit. And how I knew that is because I don't remember, know if you remember back in the days whenever there would be fundraising things that you had to do fundraising for your school trips or whatever it was that was going on. But I was always that kid that was the top fundraiser in the school. So I was always on a mission. I loved going door to door and standing there with my happy little face, sharing my, selling my, chocolate bars or whatever it was that we were selling. And, selling so much that I would get awarded afterwards for it. And so I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I remember being in grade 6 and wanting to start my own little ice cream shop, but realizing I was a country kid and nobody ever came down our road. So I knew that location was going to be a problem for me. So, I can honestly say I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. So I would say, that was always ingrained in me, but I can't honestly say that I knew as a little girl what that looked like until a little later in life.
So let's talk about when you went, grew up and you decided what you were going to be. When you did grow up, where did you start?
Yeah, so it started early for me. I had started international traveling when I was 15 years old, going to Europe and going to Morocco and Africa, and just getting that real bug for wanting to travel. And so that's what I decided to study. Is I went to college for international business, and that's what I graduated with my degree in. And then, yeah, I started working with the Canadian federal government. But very early on, I felt like something was missing, that even I was, climbing the corporate ladder and in the corporate world and in a safe government job per se that my parents loved, it wasn't resonating with my soul. So I started my first business when I was 21 years old. And so, yeah, I've been an entrepreneur now for almost 30 years. But yeah, that's kind of where it all began for me, was quite early on.
And what did you do as an entrepreneur at 21 years old?
Well, my first business was a relatively safe business to get into, which was direct sales. So I always say I became an entrepreneur by accident, literally. I was rear-ended by a Dodge Caravan one day, and I had a hard time sitting and going to work, and I was on leave for quite some time, but I never could return full time. So I had to find something that I could do when my body allowed for me to do that, because I now lived in chronic pain and I was so young, and I just thought, well, I'm going to bounce back. Everything's going to be normal and I'll be able to go back to climbing the corporate ladder, because I just thought I was going to be, an auditor for the Canadian government. And that was what my job was supposed to be. But I always say that if we're not on the path we're supposed to be on, the universe will take whatever ways or means to get us on that path. And for me, that was a car accident. And so I started my first business, which was indirect sales, selling all kinds of home decor items and things like that. And that's when I truly knew that I was meant to be an entrepreneur, because I was their seventh highest salesperson in all of North America that year. I got an all expenses paid trip to China, which of course was a big incentive for me, being a globetrotter and obsessed with the world. And yeah, so that's what got me on the path of entrepreneurship in the first place.
I love what you said about, the universe kind of brings things to us. I couldn't agree more. And it sometimes shouts so loud and then you don't listen and it shouts even louder. And and once you're on that path, it gets quiet because you're in the right place. But I definitely love what you said with that, because it's very, very true. And sorry to hear that you had gone through that, but it definitely sounds like something that happened that was more of a negative thing created something and a special road for you that became positive.
Well, that's definitely the biggest lesson that I learned, is that, everybody's going to go through some challenges and hard things that happen in our life, but it's when we can see the gifts and the good things that come out of that, or what we decide to do with those challenges, that really create an extraordinary life. And so, I looked at my situation and really looked at what can I do, and created something beautiful from it. And I'm so thankful and grateful for that car accident now. I couldn't imagine doing anything else than what I'm doing now. And I can't imagine still sitting for the government calling people about their taxes every day. It just, it wasn't a job that even aligned with my spirit. And I always tell people, pay attention to the pebbles. The universe will always throw pebbles first, and then it'll start throwing rocks when all of a sudden you just start thinking like, I should maybe leave this job. I'm not happy doing this. This doesn't feel right. And it will roll you over with a boulder. If you don't make those decisions and make that move, the universe will take its ways and means to get you on that path. And so I always say, pay attention to the pebbles. They're a lot easier, but fear often keeps us from doing that. And so I get it. That's why I run Fearless Summits.
I love it. And I'm going to get into that in a minute. I, for a short time, worked for a demolition contractor, very off the beaten path. And but now I've been a nonprofit for over 20 years, and now the podcast and consulting and coaching. And I remember, like you said, I would lay my head down on the pillow every night. I'm the one calling to demolish, large buildings and factories and facilities where people are losing their jobs. So now I am like the Grim Reaper coming in, and I would lay my head down on the pillow every night going, this cannot be what I do for the rest of my, this is just, it feels horrible. So you need to listen. You need to listen to those signs and the things that you keep coming up for you. But in 2015, in your bio, it says that you traveled to Ecuador and something changed, talking about a big ripple effect that happened there. Can you share with us what happened?
Yeah. So I was now a full-time entrepreneur, and I had a very successful events company. So I did a lot of events for a lot of famous people, sharks from Shark Tank, Food Network stars, HGTV stars, New York Times bestselling authors, famous comedians, you name it. I did a lot of different wonderful events. I had an amazing life, and created a life I loved. And it was important for me that for all those events that I did, that they also made an impact in the world. I've been always a person that wanted to make a difference and make a change. And so all of those events were tied to charitable organizations and raised funds for those charities. So in the time that I had that company, I'd raised over $2 million for charity. And one of the events I had volunteered my time for, which was a youth event that inspired high school age students to go out and change the world. And we had a lot of different wonderful keynote speakers that came in and spoke. And one of those speakers had a global organization that empowered communities globally, that helped lift people out of poverty in a lot of developing countries. And I was very interested in what they did. And as I spoke to them, they said, well, why don't you come and see it for yourself? Like, why don't you come to one of our locations and see the empowerment work that we do, and, participate in a project? And I thought, well, why not? I love to travel. I love to learn, as I mentioned before. So off I went to Ecuador, and I thought that we'd be building a school, doing this youth event, and knowing that they did build schools around the world to, help provide education to those that wouldn't otherwise get to go to school. I just assumed that's what we would be building. But when I arrived there, I found out that we were actually building a women's empowerment center. And oh boy, did they have my attention then, because I'd been empowering women my whole life. Like, since I started my own business at 21 years old, I was involved in an organization that helped women start businesses in my own city and community. And so I just knew the power of entrepreneurship and investing in women to help lift them out of poverty and to be able to help them gain financial independence. I truly believe that it's one of the most powerful things that can empower a woman in this world is financial independence, because when you invest in a woman, when you help a woman to be able to become sustainable, she's not just taking care of herself, she's also taking care of her family, she's looking out for a community around her. And so I was super excited when I started, going into this community, which was in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. And we had to arrive there by boat down one of the connecting rivers to the Amazon River. And but when I walked into that community, I must admit I was quite heavy-hearted, because this was a community that was very different than what I had ever experienced before. No access to clean drinking water, no electricity, no plumbing, no access to healthcare. It's hours away by boat to even reach a community that would have any kind of healthcare. And so I just wondered, how these people even survived every single day. But these women were so happy and so excited about this empowerment center, where they would then use the center to make their handcrafted items. They would literally go to the jungle and forge different materials that they would make necklaces and beads and pottery and things like that. And then the charity would sell those items to the world. Those funds would go back into that community to help them have access to clean drinking water, to build schools in that community, to be able to create empowerment centers, like everything that would help that community be self-sustaining. And I thought, how brilliant. And I got to know these ladies over the 2 weeks that I was there. And on the final day, as I was leaving, my heart was so heavy because, yes, I was there and I got things started and I was a part of making that happen. But I just thought that, gosh, I can go home and I can tell some good stories about, surviving the Amazon rainforest and building this empowerment center and surviving tarantulas and everything else that we saw while we were there. Or I could go home and I could create an organization that empowers all women in this world, because that's what God put me on my heart when I was there. I went to bed the last night before I left, and I woke up with a dream so vivid of what's now called One Woman, an organization that would empower women globally, that would help women be self-sustaining, to live their big goals and dreams. Because what I've learned from traveling around the world and speaking to thousands of women is that every woman has a dream for their life, and we all just need a little help to be able to achieve that. And that's where One Woman began, is that every woman just wants a little better life for herself, for her family, and for her community around her. And how powerful we are when we come together for the greater good of all women in the world. And that's what One Woman does. And so that's where it began back in 2015, 10 years ago, was just my own experience of traveling. And I know there's people out there listening that have had one of those life-changing adventures, but I had no idea that it would mean for me to let go of the business and what I was doing to create something that has now had that ripple effect and made that global impact, and, impacted the lives of, hundreds of thousands of women globally.
It's such an incredible and moving story. And I think about how many women you must have touched over the years, because this is so your first one woman event launched when?
So that following year, I traveled the world to listen to women and just hear what was important to them. And I learned the biggest lessons as to what would shape one woman from those conversations. So I went on to Kenya later that year, and I worked with women in the Masai Mara. And, I met a lady named Mama Jane. And Mama Jane, I'll never forget, because we went on a water walk. So these women would walk for miles to have to fetch water every day in a big 5-gallon jug that they would carry strapped to their back, strapped to their head. And, even young girls are doing that every single day. And I remember having to do this walk in the beating African sun and, almost feeling like I was going to pass out. I couldn't imagine how these women did this every single day. And one of the things that they did for the empowerment of women there is they had these peer lending circles that where every woman contributed to this kind of micro lending fund, and the women could borrow from that fund to help them create businesses. So maybe they're buying seed to be planted that they could grow a crop. Maybe they're buying chickens, or maybe they're buying a goat, or maybe they're buying, livestock, things like that, that would help them create a business to be self-sustainable. But Mama Jane used her money over time to build herself a brick and mortar house. And it was kind of surprising to me because we got to see this house, but this is a house that was surrounded by homes that were all made out of mud huts with thatched roofs. So this house very much stood out in the community. And as we went on this water walk and we wound up at the Masai River, I just thought the whole entire time, like, why didn't she invest in more, livestock? Why was it that it was important for her to put that money aside and build an actual brick and mortar house? It just seemed a little bit odd to me, but I thought, you know what, I'm never going to know the answer unless I ask. And so I asked her, I said, Mama Jane, why is it that, you used your money to build this home? And she said, well, I wanted to show the women that you can have anything that a man has. And I was just dumbfounded, just in terms of her tenacity and, how thinking she was, and just how bold she was, and what a leadership role that she took to just show women and empower women in her community that you can have big goals and dreams, and you can have anything that a man has in our community. And so I was just kind of flabbergasted, and I'm like, wow, Mama Jane, I'm so impressed by your story. I'm so inspired by you. You are truly a leader. And it was really cute because, she stood there and looking out onto the Mara River and put her hands on her hips, and she looked down at me and she looked up at the river and she said, yes, I am a leader. And it just was so powerful for me because she didn't just discount that. She didn't say like, oh, well, I help a little bit, and that's what women do, is they downplay their greatness all the time. But
Absolutely.
she didn't. She owned it. And that's one of the things that I learned that was going to be so powerful with empowering women, is letting them know that you are a leader. And that looks different for each and every one of us, but you need to own that and to be the change that you want to see in the world. And so later that year, I traveled to India. And that was probably where I learned the biggest lesson for empowering women. I worked with a lady named Moni Bai. And Moni created a goat program in her community to help women start goat businesses that then they could sell the offspring each year to be able to create revenue into their homes, which was about 100 US dollars, which to us seems like nothing. And for them, I mean, they're living on $1 a day or $2 a day. So it's a lot of money. And so I spent the day with Moni. We also did a water walk. We fed her goats. And then she invited me into her home to make roti. So into her home I went. And again, my heart was broken because I'm looking at this tiny home where I'm sitting on a mat in a dirt floor in this room, which is the size of, an American sized bedroom, is her kitchen, her living room, her bedroom, her everything. It's this one room. And she has one pot and a couple of spoons and, very little material things. And the whole time I'm looking around, and with my heart, I'm kind of thinking, oh my gosh, how do I help this poor woman? And the whole time in my mind, I'm thinking, how can I help and what can I do, over and over again? But this is a time where we have a chance to have a conversation. Moni can get to know about me, I can get to know about her, and we do not speak the same language. So we have a translator. So she starts asking Ricky, who's my translator, some questions about my life. And the first question is does Sharla have any goats? And so Ricky's like, oh, no, Sharla doesn't have any goats, but she does have a business. And she's like, oh, okay, that's great. And then she's like, well, tell me about Sharla's family, her children, her husband. And at this point, Ricky's saying like, oh no, he asked me and I answer. I'm like, no, I'm not married. I don't have any children. And so, he translates this to her, and I'm making my roti. Now, you got to understand that we're cooking over an open fire. I do not cook over an open fire.
Of
Her
course.
roti is perfectly round. It's all golden brown. It looks beautiful. Mine's extremely misshapen. It's half burnt. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm so distracted looking at these women's surroundings and thinking, how can I help? What can I do? And so he tells Moni about me not being married and not having any children, and I can feel this lady's eyes piercing into me at this point, and I'm not thinking anything of it. But then Ricky starts to laugh, and I said, what am I missing? There's a joke here that I'm missing. And he said, well, Moni's feeling a little bad about your situation. And I said, she's feeling bad about my situation. Like, what are you talking about? And she said, well, she said, if you like, you can come and live with her for a little while. She can teach you how to make a decent roti. She'll get you a goat. And, then you can have a family and have children, and then you'll be happy. And I thought, wow, God,
Oh,
what a beautiful lesson in perspective. As I was sitting there trying to think of how I could fix this poor woman's life and how can I help, what can I do? She was sitting there thinking, how can I help this poor woman? How can I help? What can I do? And that's when I learned the most powerful lesson with empowering women globally, is that it wasn't my job to fix anyone. because she didn't see her life as broken just as much as I didn't see my life as broken. It's just the fact that we all have big goals and dreams, and those can look different for each of us. And our goal is to just help and support each other in those. And yeah, so that's how everything began that year of learning that and coming home, and then deciding as to how then I could empower women globally. And of course, my background, as I mentioned, was in events, and so I decided to put on events called Fearless Women's Summits. What I learned from traveling the world was that every woman has a fearless story, and that story is powerful, and that story has the ability to change the world. And so that's what I went on to do. Was I planned a cross Canada tour of 15 cities across Canada, and to put on fearless summits, and women applied to speak from all over the world, which was a miracle in itself because I was only promoting the events in those cities. But applications came from Australia, New Zealand, and Europe, and all over the United States and the Caribbean. And women came to all these cities to be able to speak. And those events sold out right across Canada, with the largest Fearless Summit happening in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which had almost 800 women in attendance. And so since then, the year after that, I then did a world tour of 100 cities around the world doing Fearless Summits. I've now listened to over 2,000 Fearless stories. The youngest Fearless speaker to ever speak on the Fearless stage was 8 years old.
Incredible.
And the oldest Fearless speaker was 88 years old, and she was an Auschwitz survivor. So you can just imagine the range of stories that's been told on that stage. But as I said, what I know for sure is that every woman has a fearless story, that when she shares that fearless story, she gives another woman permission to do the same, and that these fearless stories have the ability to make an impact and change the world. As I always say, one woman can change the world, and that woman is you.
Oh my goodness. I could sit and listen to you for hours. You've got this down and you've got your story. I mean, so much incredible. Like your bio could be way even longer because there's so much there and so many learnings. And I'm sitting here just going, wow. And perspective is truly key. That story was such a beautiful story, about she wants to give you a goat and get you married off, and you're there trying to help her. So you must, I mean, the stories you hear and the women you've helped, is there, someone that you could think of? I mean, because you've been in touch with so many women. Is there something through your one woman events that just stands out? I'm sure there's a million standout stories, but is there something just that you'd love to share with our listeners from one of your events?
Oh my gosh, I could tell stories for days as to, because I just watched so
Sure.
many miracles happen in those rooms, and powerful moments of just things that happened. And just, I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned is that, we all walk around and you just see these people who just look so perfect. And then somebody gets on that stage and you hear what they're carrying and what they've been through and what they've overcome to be the incredible human being that stands there today. And I think that's the most inspiring part, is like, we never truly know what people have gone through, and I think that that's taught me to be a more compassionate person in the world, is just knowing that everybody's gone through a lot of things that's got them to who they are today, and just appreciating everyone for who they are. So yeah, and it's all those side stories and conversations that happen during a Fearless Summit, like so many women who've came up in the audience and said, because I've came to your event, now I can talk about this, or I found somebody who could help me. And the stories I get afterwards through, emails or talking to women years later of how that day impacted or changed their life, that they finally got the courage to start their business, or to do something they always dreamed of doing, or they met somebody who helped them, or they sat beside this person who's now, their dearest friend in the whole wide world. Like, so many amazing stories happen from Fearless Summits. And so, yeah, it would be hard to just choose one, but yeah, amazing
I
things.
figured that might happen. There's
Yeah.
just too many good, and I think when we're going through the hardships that you're talking about, and the learnings, right? You don't realize what you're going to get out of it after, and in the moment of going through those things, and then how you can be the teacher of how other people can go to get to the other side. I want to ask you, so people are probably, as they're listening to this, going, okay, this sounds great. One woman fearless events. What do they look like? Where are they? And what would an agenda throughout the day look like if I was to attend one of them?
Yeah. So the events, the agenda for every event is the same, but no two events are ever the same because there's 11 speakers at each event. So the host plus 10 speakers, and there's different speakers at every event. And as I said, no two women have the same fearless story. So, but they're all 20-minute TED style talks where women share their fearless story and message. And then there's networking breaks in between because of course those stories evoke emotion in us, and then women have questions for the speakers and want to interact and connect. So we have a great balance of inspiring stories and meaningful connections that women can make throughout the day. We also celebrate women at our events through our fearless awards, really celebrating women in things that I guess women wouldn't necessarily always be awarded for, things like fearless in overcoming adversity and fearless woman of inspiration and fearless in helping others. So fearless young women, so young girls who are doing great things in their communities or around the world. So we love celebrating women who are living fearlessly and doing different things in every city. And it's just another special part of that day to celebrate the women in that room.
Is there a special time of year that these are held, or they're held throughout the year?
Oh, all year, all year, all the time, and all over the world. So, right now there's events happening across Canada, across the USA. There's one in Bali, Indonesia. I have women who are planning tours in Australia right now. I have a lady planning a Dublin, Ireland event. So yeah, there's events all over the place, and anyone can host a Fearless Summit. So I used to host all of these events myself. As I mentioned, I did a 100-city world tour back in 2018, 2019, I guess it was that I did those. But then, of course, the pandemic happened. So we were doing the live events again. But sadly, in 2022, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And so I can't travel and host the events myself anymore. But I have amazing women who do that, who've been involved with One Woman for the past 10 years. These are past speakers or members or, women who just have a heart to want to serve that now host these events all over the place.
I'm sorry to hear that you've been going through that since 2022. But it's incredible. You've created this incredible an unbelievable organization that is thriving because of you as this incredible leader. And so there's how many per year?
Oh, it all depends. So now I just kind of leave it up to as to who wants to host the events. So I would say right now on the list, there's maybe around 30 events happening right now. But there'll be more events as time goes on. Like I just added a New Jersey event this week, and another event in Maryland is happening. So yeah, I think you just kind of got to check the website to see where events are going on. And of course, any woman can apply to speak and share her fearless story. I should say any woman or girl, because like I said, we've had girls that have spoke on the fearless stage as well. And so, yeah.
Well, I'm very happy that you've come to New Jersey because that's where I am located, and I definitely want to put myself in as a potential speaker. I love what you're doing. I love the organization, and I know there's a membership as well to be part of this. Correct?
Yes.
Do you want?
So that's One Woman began with with our memberships, just because I was always trying to think of how am I going to raise funds? Because we partner with charities in developing countries to help empower women and girls. So our pillars are helping to empower women through starting business, entrepreneurship, skills training. So helping women gain skills so that they can earn a livable wage. We work with a lot of partner charities that help rescue women and girls from trafficking situations and things like that. So, one of our partner charities, Bali Wise in Indonesia, they do skills training for young women to, help empower them to not be in, trafficking situations and also to be able to earn a living wage. And then we also empower women through education and also girls. So, we send a lot of little girls to school. We're blessed to live in countries like Canada and the USA where, education is free, at least up to secondary school. But in so many countries, girls don't get to go to school. I mean, there's millions and millions and millions of girls in this world that will never see the inside of a classroom. And I truly believe that education is the ultimate equalizer. So we partner with various charities in different countries that send girls to school at all levels of education. So from primary school, secondary school, and even post-secondary school. Now that I've been doing this a long time, I've had girls even graduate from university. The first girl that we sent through university, she's from Indonesia. She actually came and lived with me in Canada for 4 months. We put her through business school. She graduated with her degree. She graduated cum laude, top of her class. And she's now living and working in Germany. And that would have never been a possibility for her life. She lived in extreme poverty. And it just changed the whole trajectory of her life. And so we do our best to try to educate as many girls as we can and do the work that we can. And that's all done through our memberships. So when women become a member, we use a portion of those memberships to be able to provide to help our partner charities do the work that they do, because as you know from the nonprofit world, that's the hardest part, is that constant trying to raise funds to do the great work that you do. And so we don't actually build the schools per se, or we're not there teaching the kids. They do all of that work. We just partner with them to be able to sponsor the girls and the women to be able to live their dreams.
So with all that you've given to everyone else, what has this given to you?
A life worth living. A life worth living. To me, because I've been, so sick, I've been told, I was going to die more times than I can count now. I always say that the biggest fear any one of us could ever have is the fear of regret, getting to the end of our days saying, I wish I woulda, coulda, or shoulda. I know that when I got sick and somebody told me that, and I really had to think about that it's like, okay, if this is it, God, you know what, I'm good to go, because I've lived an extraordinary life. I've made the impact that I want to make. I've made a difference. I've traveled the world. I've impacted and helped so many people. I've used all the God-given gifts and skills and talents that's been divinely given to me. Like, I want to, I'll leave with a heart that's full, but that, I'm empty in terms of I've given everything that I could give. And I think that for most of the women that I have conversations with, that's their big goals and dreams, is that, they want to create an impact in the world, that they know they have the ability to do that. And so what my biggest goal is every single day is to pour into them that they can do it. Because as women, we often struggle with the I'm not good enough or smart enough or talented enough or whatever it is. And you are enough. You were born enough. Everything you need, all that you want to be, all that you want to create, all that you want to do, well, it's already inside of you. Your job is to just give it permission. Your job is to just say yes. And so that's what living fearless is all about, is, just trusting in that divine path that you are capable of creating anything that you want to create and make the impact that you want to make, and how powerful you are to be able to do that. And so, I've been able to live an extraordinary life. I'm thankful and grateful that I'm still here, that I can do this work every single day. I will never stop doing it. And like I said, I think for each of us, it's just being able to get to our end of our days saying that, wow, what a ride, what an extraordinary life.
It's incredible. There's so many things I want to say in it right now, because honestly, you're just a warrior and someone that I know that everybody, I mean, I've just met you and I look so up to you, and you make me tear up with you. And, I know that my guests and my listeners and I continue to pray for you to be here for longer so that you can do more, because it seems like nothing's going to stop you. And that's what I want to ask you, because this is very important. I know a lot of people that feel very stuck. They feel very stuck. They're very afraid. They're living in imposter syndrome. So they become paralyzed in that fear. And, you're talking about fearless, right? And yet, all of us are one diagnosis away from our life changing in a very impactful way, yet we don't live that way. We never live that way. We live like all of us are just going to be given all of these days because they're due, but they're not, right? And no matter what, whether it's a diagnosis or a terrible tragedy or whatever it is, nobody is guaranteed anything. Okay. So, but we don't live as a society like that. So we always say tomorrow and we always say next year. How do we get people who feel so stuck or living in imposter syndrome to go and move through it?
Yeah. So, my advice regarding that is that what I know for sure is that, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And, 7 months prior to me being diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, I actually clinically died of a pulmonary embolism causing cardiac arrest. Like I was dead for a full 2 minutes. But what I know is that we never truly die, and maybe that's a story for another day because, that's and maybe a different podcast. But what I know is that we are powerful beyond measure. We're part of this omnipresence that, we often call God, that is in us, through us, and all around us. And it's our ability to be able to tap into that unlimited power to be and become and do anything that we want to do. But it's this human experience that often keeps us small. It's the experiences that we have that shape us and, have us these beliefs about ourselves in terms of the things that we can't do, or these fears that we start formulating that keep us from living our big goals and dreams and saying what we want to say and doing what we want to do and all of those things. So, my biggest, I guess, advice regarding that is to always tap into that spiritual self, that unlimited possibility, that omnipresence that's capable of doing anything and everything. And when it comes right down to it, is that when you start that, voice that lives in your head that's telling you those things, is you start questioning it and saying, is that my truth? Because chances are it is not. It's a story that you've made up and started to believe about yourself, or that somebody else has told you and you started to believe it about yourself. But that isn't your truth. So, yeah, that would be my advice is, creating that space, whatever that looks like for you, to create that divine connection and really realizing that you are capable of doing, being, or creating anything that you want to do.
Unbelievable. I swear I'm going to walk away from this podcast, but I'm not hitting the ground just because of your spirit and just the incredible words that you're sharing. What else would you, when you think about the women, the girls that you have, been in front of and had the opportunity to speak to, what else would you want to share with the listeners? Because right now, in general, there's a lot going on in regards to the things that are happening with women, and I think also, we're still struggling with making the same wage as a man. We're still in that space, and there's a lot of different things, different rights, different things that are happening right now. What are your thoughts on, how do we all come together as women and create the space that we deserve? You've started your one woman fearless piece. What else can we do you think, in your expertise?
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, you are a leader and you're the only person getting in your own way of whatever greatness it is that God has planted in you to do in this world. And please do not rob the world of that. We live this short, precious life. We only have this short amount of time to step into our greatness and to become all that we were destined to be. And so I just say, become that leader that you have always been. Step into that, whatever that looks like for you. Use your voice and make the impact that you want to make in this world. This world is a very broken place. And the only thing that will change that is love. And what I know from the women that I've spoke to and worked with and, listened to is that they have this heart-centered business in them. They have this heart-centered purpose in them that you got to give that permission and light up this world, because that's when things will change. But we all need to step into our greatness to be able to do that. As I said before, one woman can change the world, and that woman, she's you.
What keeps you so connected to all of this? What is the driving force every day when you get up, knowing what, you've got a lot on your plate. We all have a lot on our plate, but you have a lot on your plate too. And what is it that when you wake up, you go, I'm getting out of bed. I'm going to curl my hair. I'm going to get on this podcast. I'm going to, do all my videos. I'm going to create business. What makes you continue that?
Well, I would say my biggest thing is gratitude. I'm grateful every day for every moment that I have, for the extraordinary life that I've lived, to meet amazing women like you every day. Um,
I'm sorry, I don't want to make you upset. I know it's
it's
it's a
okay.
very listen, this is and there's so many people. I just want to share this while you're
Yep.
composing there, is that there's so many women dealing and men dealing with this kind of diagnosis, and it's important that we allow people to feel and share the grief that they're feeling, because you feel like your body's not doing what you want it to do, and it's I know it's a lot to go through, and if I could hug you, I would, Sharla.
Uh, no, I appreciate that, and probably why I don't do a lot of podcasts, because I'm strong in so many ways, but I'm an empath. I feel everything. It's probably
Yeah.
why I'm good at what I do, and am able to do what I do. But it has both sides of things, and so yeah, like I said, I'm just grateful to be able to do what I do every day. And I know that everybody out there, that life isn't easy, I have my own struggles, but I've listened to all these fearless stories of what women have overcame. Like I said, from, Auschwitz survivors to women who've survived domestic abuse to every kind of illness and diagnosis, so many different things, women who've escaped countries of extreme abuse. Like, I mean, I've listened to thousands of stories. So, none of us go through life without bruises and being unscathed. But the thing is that I always say the pain of being you is the power of being you. And so, we can't look at these as being things to keep us stuck or make us small, or to stay in. It's using that as fire, as to who we want to be. I always say, in the darkest moments of my life, I feel like God was doing his greatest work. And so, life looks different for me, but you got to look at the gifts in that. For over 2 years, I was bedridden because of my illness. And when I came to wanting to go back and doing Fearless Summits, I knew that I physically could not do that. So I thought, well, God, you better create a way for me, because how is this going to happen otherwise? And so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to put it out there and see if women want to do it. And women answered that call. And now there's events happening all over the world, places I've never been, multiple events happening on the same day in different places. On March 29th, there's an event in Mississauga, Ontario. There's one in Indonesia, and there's one in Atlanta. So, I just watch how God is multiplying the impact, that even though I can't even physically be at those events, women will still be empowered. And maybe I had to learn how to get out of my own way to truly empower women and make an impact in the world. And that's how I choose to look at it. Because the way I see it is that maybe God had to take away my ability to walk to teach me that I always knew how to fly. And that's the way I choose to look at it. So no matter what you're facing, whatever your circumstance is, always remember that the pain of being you is the power of being you. And look for the gifts in that situation. And it's okay to be sad. I was pretty sad for 2 years.
Mhm.
But when that day comes, when you're ready to take that first step, just know that, the universe is waiting for you to do great things.
I wrote that down. The pain of being you is the power of being you. And that is just incredible to share. Did you ever have imposter syndrome in this at all while you were trying to build this? Was there ever a moment where you had any doubt, or where you kind of felt like you were stuck?
Oh my gosh, everybody struggles with imposter syndrome. When I was coming back and that was put on my heart to create this global organization, I mean, I had a successful business in the city where I live, which is in, Northern Ontario, Canada, a city of about 100,000 people, but I never did anything on a global scale. I had no clue what I was doing. And I know there's women who's out there that says, but Sharla, I want to do, these big things, but I don't know how to do it. And here's the beautiful part is you don't need to know the how. The universe already has that figured out. You just got to take the first step and then the next right step. The great Martin Luther King Jr. said, take your first step in faith. You don't have to see the entire staircase. Just take the first step. And that's all I've ever done. And I've watched miracles happen. And, I don't look at what is Charla possible. I always look at what is God possible through me. And I think that if you take that perspective and get out of your own way, you will see these miracles that happen. Because, if I looked at, could Charlotte create a global organization of, almost 500,000 women globally? I would say, no, that you're crazy. But like I said, it's not what was Charlotte possible. It was what was God possible through me. And so that's what exists today. And because I just had faith that was bigger than my fear. And that's what I always tell women to do is just, you can live in faith, you can live in fear. And I choose faith. And I hope you do too.
So it's funny because I have a saying and I do a training on when your why is greater than your how, anything is possible. And I really believe that. And kind of that is what you were talking about there too, is when you feel it and when you know it, that's when you really can say, okay, you know what? I have enough why in me that that how is just doesn't matter anymore. You have to allow yourself to get through the fear. Also, the other piece that I share a lot of times too is the importance of building your own table if you can't get a seat at one or if you're not invited to one. And you created a table that invites everyone, and that's something that I believe in so much is build your own table. If you're not sitting at the right tables and you're not getting invited to have a seat, create one. But when you build yours, make sure that you open your invitation because you don't want to be just like the person who closed the door on you. So I totally resonate with what you are saying. Any books that you would like to share that you've read that have been changing for you, taught you something that you think others should be reading as
One that I love that I've read, gosh, this was a few years back. It's called Go Giver, I believe it's called Go Giver. It's just all about, how you can be successful in terms of making a difference in the world. It's probably one of the most inspiring books I've met for or I've read in terms of making a difference and wanting to make a real impact. It's called Go Giver, but I don't know the author. But yeah, if you haven't read it, it's a wonderful story.
well. I definitely will add that to my list. That is for sure. So I'm so excited that New Jersey is coming through now. So that's amazing. Is there anything else about One Woman and include your website? Because we haven't done that up till now. I want to make sure that they can find One Woman.
Yeah, so One Woman is the website is onewoman.ca. So a lot of people will automatically type in .com, but yeah, it is .ca, and One Woman is spelled out ONEWOMAN.ca. And yeah, and if you ever have questions about what we do, just hit the email or the contact button, and myself or my assistant will get back to you, and we'd love to tell you more about what we're doing. And of course, it has the whole lineup of Fearless Summits coming up and all the great work that we do to empower women globally.
That's incredible. And I'm excited that I found you. I know that, like I said, I don't want to make you tear up again, but I think it's important for those who are listening right now that may be dealing with some hardships and some, diagnoses that they're struggling with. What can you share with them that has kept you going? Besides One Woman, what inside of you do you think it is that you can say that you could share any message that you want to give to those who may be listening to keep them going like you are?
Yeah, well, like for me, it's always been, I've had a very strong faith, and I think that that is what kept me through, 2.5 years of going through stage 4 cancer and everything else that that went through that. And, yeah, like when I first was diagnosed, everybody's always like, oh, beat cancer and, kick cancer and all this stuff. And I looked at it from a different perspective. My whole perspective was that I was going to love myself through cancer because cancer was so much bigger than me, especially when you're diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. But the way I looked at it, that the only thing bigger than cancer is love. And I created that connection. And every moment of every day, I connected to that. And I truly believe that that's what healed me. And, of course, I went through cancer treatment and the doctors, but it was just my approach of everything. The connections I had with those doctors, like I had the most special and spiritual connections with the doctors, with the nurses, with the porters, with, the my neighbor in the bed next to me, because I was hospitalized for almost 3 months of going through treatment. It's just we decide how we want to show up in the world and who we want to be. And even in those dark moments, we can choose love and we can choose our own path. And that takes a whole lot of faith, trusting that there are better days ahead. And that we're all going to go through those moments in our life. That's just what life is. But knowing that greater things are coming. And it's why I'm still here to be able to share this story with you. And why gratitude is so important for me is that there's always something to be grateful for. Even if it's the fact that I just woke up this morning, that's enough.
Thank you, Sharla. Thank you for sharing so much today with us. It's an incredible story. And I will tell you, I will walk away from today knowing that there's so many things that I feel like are obstacles and challenges and the imposter syndrome. No matter how strong you are, sometimes that voice just comes in and says something else. I always say name the voice so you can actually talk to it and tell it off, right? You gotta tell it off. But any other things you want to share before we go today?
No, I just want to, thank you, Jody, for asking me to be on the podcast and to share with your guests today. It's been an honor and a privilege to be able to share. Like I said, I create a stage for thousands of women to share their fearless stories, and I rarely share my own. And so I thank you for asking me and allowing me this space to be able to share a little bit about what this journey has meant to me. I really appreciate everything that you do to highlight change makers in the world, and I'm honored that you chose me.
I just want to thank you. And thank you. You've given me the greatest honor by sharing your story through Changemakers. You're going to be, you've taught so many women, but through here, we've been downloaded in about 865-ish cities around the globe. So I know that your voice will be heard even more, maybe to some who have not heard your story and now will attend your events because now they may never have heard of one woman fearless events. One more time, can you give us the website?
Yeah, it's onewoman.ca, ONEWOMAN.ca.
Well, Sharla Brown, I'm honored to know you now. Now you're part of our Changemaker family, and we're just so thrilled to have you part of that. And again, thank you for sharing. And I'm going to say what I say at the end of every single podcast. Today is the day. You cannot go back to yesterday, and you do not yet own tomorrow. So what small or large steps are you going to take today to get yourself closer to your goals? Thank you again, Sharla Brown. And we are sending you so much love and so much healing. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.